Okay, Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome back to the next session of MoroccoAI after a great talk by a representative of OECD, where we have seen together important policies about OECD countries in order to implement these AI policies. And it was a great talk. And now we are with Professor Fouad Laroui. I will just introduce Professor Laroui, who is a professor of epistemology and writer. And the list is very long. He's a former student of Lycée Lyoté in Casablanca. Fouad Laroui holds a civil engineer's degree from l'École nationale des Ponts et Chaussées in Paris, 1982, and a PhD in economics in Paris in 1994. After managing a phosphate mine in Morocco and selling chemicals in Asia between 1985 and 1990 on behalf of OCP, he moved to Amsterdam in 1990, where he taught economics and then environmental sciences for several years. Alongside his teaching career, Fouad Laroui devotes himself to writing, and this is his title, a writer. And he has published around 10 novels and several collections of short stories and essays. He has received numerous awards, including the Albert Camus Prize, le Prix de la Nouvelle de la Société des gens de lettres, le Prix Goncourt de la Nouvelle, and la Grande Bataille de la Francophonie from l'Académie Française. So, Professor Laroui, welcome to our annual conference, MoroccoAI. It is really a great honor to have you among us in order to tackle this subject of AI and innovation from different perspectives. So as you may have noticed that we have several keynote speakers that will tackle the subject from technological point of view and from economical point of view, and we are very happy to have you among us in order to share with us your thought about AI. And I think that the title that you have shared is very important. Let me just read it. The title will make very difficult the moderation of this session with you, Professor Laroui, but I will try to do my best. AI, Wittgenstein, and the wonders of poetics. So please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mohammed. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. And congratulations to all the team for everything you do, which is very important, obviously, for our country. Well, the title, yes, AI, Wittgenstein, and the wonders of poetics. But first of all, Mohammed, as you said, I would like to stress that I'm not an expert in artificial intelligence. As an engineer, I understand more or less what it's about. I'm interested in it, very much interested. Sometimes I'm wary, suspect something fishy about artificial intelligence. I think about it a lot, but I'm not an expert, right? I do not know the technical details, the algorithms. That's something for my good friend Rashid Garraoui, but I'm not an algorithm guy. I don't know anything about data mining techniques, etc., etc. When I was studying mathematics at Lycée Lyoté and then engineering in the 80s, we had what was then called expert systems, right? An expert system is a tool capable of reproducing the cognitive mechanisms of an expert, of human expert in a particular field. So an expert system can answer questions by reasoning from facts and rules. Well, that's something I did in the 80s. So I see more or less the connection between expert systems and AI, but that's where my technical knowledge stops, ends. So this talk, it's going to be about philosophy. And this talk should therefore be also considered a work in progress when I will try to share some ideas with you, and then through a debate that you are going to moderate, dear Mohammed, I hope to sharpen my own conceptions and on the subject. Another thing, I shall focus on one particular point, the AI that produces text, right? It's a part of what's called Gen AI, generative AI. You know, obviously, everything about it. It generates text in response to requests, the so-called prompts. Okay, that's the focus of my talk, right? I'm going to talk about 4 points. So I say immediately what are the points, or like conclusions, in fact. The first point is about ethics and aesthetics. What are the challenges that Gen AI poses when it comes to ethics and aesthetics? Second point, the question is, where does AI speak from? So where does AI speak from? From what point, where? The third point is the necessity in life to take sides, what we call in French, prendre parti, take sides. So my question is, how could Gen AI take sides? And the fourth and last point is about poetics. The danger of the simulacrum, and I will explain what simulacrum is, replacing reality by something that pretends to be reality, but is not. You can think of a deepfake and this kind of things. And to end this introduction, it might surprise you to know that I'm also going to speak about Lenin, the Russian revolutionary, and about Trotsky. But there is a point. I think the connection between Lenin and artificial intelligence is not very evident, but I think there is a point there. Okay, let's start. Okay, let's start with Wittgenstein, right? As you know, Wittgenstein was born in Vienna, in Austria, in 1889, I think, the same year as Heidegger, and he died in Cambridge, England. I was happy enough to work in Cambridge for a couple of years, so he left a deep impact in Cambridge. By the way, Wittgenstein studied engineering, but he was above all a philosopher, one of the most important philosophers of the 18th century, right? Obviously, this is not the place and time to talk about his entire work, which mainly focuses on logic and philosophy of language. He published only one major work, by the way, during his lifetime, a book called, it's a Latin title, Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, in 1921. That was the first appearance of that book in German. Anyway, it's about the limits of language. As you know, generative AI is about language. That's why I think that Wittgenstein is relevant. And that book, Tractatus, the famous book of Wittgenstein, ends with a sentence which is also very famous, and this is the sentence: what one cannot speak of, one must pass over in silence. In French, we say, ce dont on ne peut parler, il faut le taire, ou il faut le passer sous silence. We will come back to this point later. But let's say, essentially, what does it mean? The last sentence of Wittgenstein in Tractatus, it means that we can speak in a meaningful way only about facts in the physical world. That's what it means, right? The only thing that we can speak of are facts in the physical world. And Wittgenstein says, the rest, let's not talk about it. Because if we start talking about the rest, we produce meaningless, absurd, meaningless sentences. Now, maybe you start to see the connection with generative AI, because generative AI produces texts. So we have to think about meaningless and meaningful statements. And to think about meaningless and meaningful statements, I think the best starting point is Wittgenstein. However, what interests me here is a lecture that Wittgenstein gave in 1929, yes, in Cambridge, and which is known under the title Lecture on Ethics, right? It contains a wonderful metaphor. And once one understands the metaphor, it's great because you can use it all the time. It's a metaphor, it's a thought experiment, and it's known as the big book metaphor, the big book, le gros livre de Wittgenstein, right? So what is it about? Wittgenstein starts from a definition about ethics. It's very simple. Ethics is the inquiry to determine what is good. Very simple definition. But he immediately says something interesting. He says that actually he means ethics and aesthetics. That's what he's going to talk about in the big book. Aesthetics, obviously, is about what is beautiful. Why is something beautiful? Why is something nice to listen to? Piano concerto by Mozart, obviously, almost everybody would agree that it's nice to listen to, but why? Why is it so? That's aesthetics, right? Now, Wittgenstein specifies something interesting, that the expressions can always be used in two different meanings, and we should distinguish. For instance, if I ask you, what's the best way, the good way to go from Ben Guerir, because I'm now in Ben Guerir, to go from Ben Guerir to Casablanca, if I ask you what's the good way, you would probably tell me, well, take the highway, for instance, or if you don't want to spend any money, take the RN something, right? But that is not, it is a wrong use of the word good. That's what Wittgenstein says, because you can always replace good by something else. Like what is the quickest way to go to Casablanca, for instance? What is the cheapest way to go to Casablanca? When we say what's the good way to go to Casablanca, it's an error, because we seem to be talking about ethics, but it has nothing to do with ethics. It's just the quickest way to go to Casablanca, or the cheapest way, etc. So let's get rid of all this relative use of ethics. When Wittgenstein talks about ethics, it's something absolute. For instance, are the general the actions of Buddha, are they good? You are not going to talk about are they quick or cheap or something. Are they good? Was Hitler a bad man? Not a tall, short something. Bad, good. That's ethic in absolute terms, right? Now, this is the surprising conclusion that Wittgenstein reaches in his lecture of 1929. He says that it's impossible to have a factual ethical judgment. It's impossible to say something ethical which is also a fact. That's very surprising, but we'll explain that. And he says also a factual statement, a fact, like, I don't know, I have eaten my breakfast this morning, some such, which is a fact, can never have can never contain an ethical judgment, and it cannot imply an ethical judgment. Now, let's, maybe it's not very clear, so let's go to the metaphor of the big book, because this is what's about. This is what he says, what Wittgenstein says. It's a metaphor. Let's suppose an omniscient, someone who knows everything, an omniscient individual who knows absolutely every fact, everything that has happened since the beginning of the universe, since the Big Bang. So let's suppose that somebody knows absolutely everything that happened, right? And who records the knowledge, that knowledge, absolute knowledge of every fact since the Big Bang in a book. Obviously, the book will be very big, very thick. So that's why it's called the metaphor of the big book, right? Now, it will be a complete description of the world. You will find it all the facts. For the most minuscule and trivial, how the hairdresser in Ben Guerir cut my hair yesterday, that's a fact. It will be in the big book. But you will also find the most spectacular, like a tsunami and all the events, the facts of the World War II, everything. Okay, so we agree now about the big book. Now here is what is really striking. Wittgenstein claims that there would not be a single ethical statement in the big book. It would contain relative value judgments, right? As you say, it is the right road to go to Casablanca, blah, 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 according to some criterion, but it will not contain any absolute value judgment. For instance, judgment about Buddha, judgment about Hitler, or somebody stole your purse yesterday, it would be recorded as a fact. And I hope that nobody stole your purse yesterday. But if somebody did, it will be in the big book of Wittgenstein as a fact. But there will be no ethical annotation about it, right? If you will, Wittgenstein names scientific the proposition that expresses facts scientifically. That's what will be in the big book. Now, this is very surprising, but why? Why is it so? Because, and that's the big idea of Wittgenstein, language, in fact, if it is meaningful, language allows the description of facts, right? As well as the expression of relative values, but never of absolute values. Now, this is surprising because you could tell me, wait, what? In all religious texts, in the Bible, in the Quran, you have, there are words, Bible, Quran, words, and yet you have a lot of ethical rules. But Wittgenstein says that they are not really metaphors, they're not about facts. There's something completely different. In fact, he goes so far as to say, it's very surprising, that every ethical statement is inherently absurd. Doesn't mean it doesn't have any value, doesn't mean that we should live without any ethics. No, that's not what he says. He only says that you cannot express absolute values with words. Language is done for something completely different, right? By the way, to better understand this idea, you have to go to the first proposition of Tractacus, of Wittgenstein's Tractacus. The first proposition is very interesting because it says, in German is Die Welt ist alles, was davor ist. In English is the world is everything that happens, which means that the world is the totality of facts, not of things. The fact that I'm giving a lecture here, this is part of the world, obviously, but the pen I'm holding and the sum of the pen, that's not really what the world is. The world is the totality of facts, okay? So that explains, by the way, why he says, Wittgenstein, that the only thing meaningful is when you describe facts in the physical world. All right, now I think that we understand more or less what he means. And what's the connection? What's the connection with Gen AI? Now, generative AI expresses itself in words. Thus, one could actually write the big book describing all the facts from the beginning of the universe, from the Big Bang, with Gen AI, if you wanted to. That could be, actually, maybe this is what's going to happen in the future. The omniscient person would be just AI. But, and this is the conclusion, my first conclusion that we could discuss later, the first one, it's impossible to say anything sensible about ethics and aesthetics with AI. That's the first provisional conclusion that we can discuss later. All right. This idea reminds me, okay, so now I go to the second point of my talk. May, the beautiful, le joli mois de mai, as we say in French, le beautiful month of May, 1968. Dear Mohammed, you were not born then, I guess, but it happened. It was before you were even born. In 1968, students revolt in Paris and elsewhere in the world. Actually, I think it started in Berkeley, in the United States. Anyway, the students revolt in 1968 in Paris. One of their most famous slogans was, "Where are you speaking from?" D'où tu parles, they say in French. D'où tu parles. Indeed, as soon as somebody spoke, for example, an intellectual, a politician, a professor, the student would stop him immediately and shout, Where are you speaking from? D'où tu parles? Why? Why? Because obviously every one of us is in a given social situation with his own interests, with his baggage of beliefs, prejudices. Each one of us, to speak in philosophical terms, every one of us is a Dasein. That's what Heidegger would say, Dasein, being there, of being there, être le là. So you are somewhere. You cannot escape the fact that you are, first and foremost, somewhere in some unit of time and place, in some social situation. That's what Dasein is. So the idea that an individual could express a global, general, absolute point of view is a contradiction in terms. Every one of us is a Dasein, being there. That's the title of a beautiful novel, but it's not, of Jerzy Kosinski, I think, but it's another thing. Anyway, each one of us speaks from a given place, right? Now, if we look at existentialism, right, one of the basic tenets, maybe the most important tenets of existentialism, which started with Heidegger, then you go to Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir, the whole. One of the basic tenets is this one: there are only individuals. You have to start with the individual. The group comes after that, and humanity comes after that. Il n'y a que des individus. That's what existentialism, and certainly Jean-Paul Sartre, said all the time. So every point of view which is expressed in this world is necessarily the point of view of an individual to start with. After that, it can be of a group. So this is the legitimate question, which is my second question. When it expresses a point of view, where does Gen AI speak from? That's my second question. Now, let's go to the third part. And here, Lenin comes in. As you know, from the year 1900, Lenin, Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, to give him his full name, spent some time in Zurich, in Switzerland, in Munich, London. He was in exile, fearing the police of the Tsar. And he took advantage of this kind of holiday, well, it's an exile, to go to public libraries and to read a lot of philosophy and write books, political analysis. In one of these books, he theorizes the notion of, and this is what I'm going to talk about, taking sides. In French, it's called prendre parti, right? He said, Lenin said, well, it's well and good to delve into philosophy, to go further and further in thinking, reading, wonderful. But at a certain point, one must take sides. Let's not forget that Lenin was a Marxist, obviously, and that the first sentence of Marx and Engels' Communist Manifesto, 1848, was the history of all society to the present day, up to the present day, has been nothing but the history of class struggle, right? Class struggles. Reality, if you look at reality, the real, is the class struggle. Therefore, there is a moment when you stop just philosophizing and you have to take sides. If you are a worker, proletarian, for instance, you will take side in the struggle against bourgeois domination, in a way. Now, Trotsky was obviously a comrade of Lenin, friend. He would express it even more clearly in a pamphlet, which was called, entitled Their Morals and Ours. In French, it's Leur morale et la nôtre. And for him, the same act committed by a bourgeois, let's say, or by a proletarian, that is to say, two acts that could not be distinguished from one another, from each other, in Wittgenstein's big book, will not have the same moral value. Because even if a proletarian commits a crime, But why? Because he wants to bring about a classless society, which is a noble objective. It's not bad. Trotsky would say that. It's not bad. Whereas, if a bourgeois committed a crime to suppress the advent of classless society, which is noble, good ideal, that would be a crime. That's what the idea of Trotsky. Now, we could go, obviously, to Immanuel Kant and think about something called, there are two forms of rationality, something which is called the hypothetical, and the other one is categorical imperative. Hypothetical is when you don't pose the end, just you suppose the end and you look for the means. You say, for instance, if I want to do this, then I should do that. That's the hypothetical imperative. And there is the categorical imperative. There is no if about it. It's you should not do this or you should this. The most famous example in Kant is, for instance, about lying. For Kant, lying, you should never lie. That's a categorical imperative. It's not hypothetical. There are not situations where you say, well, if I want to attain this goal, I could be like, no, it's imperative. Okay, that's the connection with what Trotsky says. Now the question is, how could generative AI take side? Because that's the question. You take side, prendre parti, the expression of Vladimir Lenin. You take side because you are, as an individual, as a human being, you are in a reality of, for instance, class struggle. So you have to take sides. How is generative AI going to take sides? It's not concerned by class struggle. It's not concerned by a Dasein experience of being somewhere. I don't even know where it is. So that's my third question. Now, the fourth and last point is about poetics. Now, poetics, most people think that has something to do with poetry. Well, poetics is not poetry, right? Poetics is simply the art of telling a story. It doesn't have to be poetry. It could be poetry. It doesn't have to be. Poetics is just the art of telling a story. And it involves necessarily a human being. I'll give you an example. Suppose, dear Mohammed, that to make a quick buck, you would work for the ONCF, the railway company, why not, on a Sunday? And then you have to write a sign warning passengers in Ben Guerir, for instance, that the 4:30 p.m. train coming from Casablanca will be 15 minutes late. That's your job. So what do? Okay, I'll answer instead of you. Obviously, there is only one way of doing that. You will write a sign and you will write on it, the 4:30 p.m. train will be 15 minutes late, because that's the core of the message, right? But suppose that you are in kind of a funny mood, and then we enter poetics, and then you take the fancy to write this. This is what you write, and you put it in the Ben Guerir railway station. You will write, the gleaming steel carriage has allowed itself to dawdle. Dawdle is lambiner in French. To dawdle on the way and will be, the naughty boy, 14 minutes plus 1 late. Now, what's the difference between the factual message that the railway society has asked you to write and this one? There is no difference. It's the same message, right? It's exactly the same. But if you do that, I can guarantee you that you will be fired by the railway company. And it's funny because it's the same message. But in the second one, you used poetics, means that you used the art of telling a story in a personal way. You are the only one who could do that. Somebody else would write something else. There you see again that the individual is coming in the story in poetics. And you see the analogy with Wittgenstein's big book. The big book would contain nothing more than pure facts and information. On such a day, the 4:30 p.m. train from Casablanca to Bengurir was 15 minutes late. That's it. Everything, that's the point, everything that poetics adds to our world will not be in the big book, right? So here is the fourth and last problem of question. Obviously, Gen AI, generative AI, must stick, in the case of this train situation, to the factual message, right? But if it replaces human beings everywhere, then we would lose the grain of poetry, of fantasy, of humor, which is absolutely essential to our being, right? How could you envisage a world without fantasy, without humor, without poetry? Of course, we could give AI patterns and templates and algorithms that could generate messages simulating poetry, simulating fantasy, simulating humor. But what's the point? What's the point if there is no human being behind it? Can you laugh at some humor made by AI? Because laughing is always laughing with someone. I don't see myself laughing with an algorithm. With all respect to Rashid, I can't see myself laughing with an algorithm. Generative AI is only a simulacrum. That's a beautiful word, I have to explain. A simulacrum is an appearance, just something, an appearance that does not refer to any underlying reality, but it claims to be reality. This is the Greek meaning. In Greek, we have a word, phantasma, which is actually simulacrum. But in Greek, we have another word, which is icon. An icon is a copy. A copy is okay. An icon, a copy, is not pretending to be the reality. But phantasma, in Greek, which we translate by a Latin word, strange enough, simulacrum, pretends to be the reality. A copy, icon, does not lie. A simulacrum lies. And then you see, obviously, all the fake, deep fake things. I finish with something which really made me very, very angry. I love art. And one of my greatest, I say, artists, I'm always very moved when I go to a museum and I watch a painting by Rembrandt. It's not because I lived 20 years in Holland, but Rembrandt with, obviously, I don't know, Velasquez, Leonardo da Vinci was one of the greatest painters ever. Now, there is a project called The Next Rembrandt. Slightly hubris here, but anyway. And they have produced a fake Rembrandt painting based on the analysis of large parts of the work of Rembrandt, the real Rembrandt, who was born in 1606, died in 1669, I think. I mean, they have produced a fake Rembrandt. And I don't understand. Why? Why do you do that? What does this simulacrum lead us to? Does it add anything to the world? Here, we should perhaps recall a famous essay written by the German philosopher Walter Benjamin. The French would say Walter Benjamin. It's Walter Benjamin, 1935. And he wrote a wonderful book, written an essay, The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, right? And this is what he says. Benjamin says there is a loss of the aura. The aura is the halo that when you see the painting of a saint, for instance, there's a halo, a kind of golden halo. And what he says, Walter Benjamin, he says he takes the example of the icons in Orthodox churches, right? And he say before photography, before photography, before mechanical reproduction of works of art, if you wanted to look at an icon of, let's say, Andrei Rublev, for instance, the greatest painter of icons, hundreds of years before, you had to travel. You had to do kind of pilgrimage. You had to go to one place, and you knew that you had that icon of Andrei Rublev there, and it would take you days. And then you were there, and you enter the church, and then you are in front of it. It's a mystical experience. Now you just Google Andrei Rublev, and you have all the icons of Rublev. In 1935, and at that time you didn't have any Google of internet, but Walter Benjamin already said, we are losing something. We are losing something. We are losing the aura of the real work of art. You see what I mean? I'll give you an example. By the way, I think about it right now. I didn't prepare it, but most people, when they go to Paris and they look at Mona Lisa, Gioconda, they are disappointed. Why? It's one of the greatest paintings in the world. They all, oh, that's it. Because they have seen it 1 million times. They've seen it reproduced in photos 1 million times. So they go to Paris and they wait 3 hours in a queue and they pay 25 euros, and suddenly they're in front with 100 million other tourists of Mona Lisa, the Gioconda by Leonardo da Vinci. They say, oh, is that it? I'm disappointed. Well, you're disappointed because you have already seen millions of reproduction of that. Walter Benjamin would say 100 years ago, 200 years ago, going and looking at Mona Lisa, the Gioconda by Leonardo da Vinci, would have been a mystical experience, but we lost the aura, right? So the next Rembrandt, that project, has needlessly produced a fake Rembrandt painting. I'm very angry about that. they may be very proud of themselves. I won't call them Philistines, but they were very proud of themselves. But they have only caused the real Rembrandt paintings to lose some of their aura. Now we have another fake Rembrandt. Why not 2? Why not 10? Why not 100,000 new Rembrandts? This is incredible. And this is exactly the danger that the philosopher Martin Heidegger, he told us about this danger, about the world of technology. And I will end with this. Heidegger actually quoted Nietzsche. And Nietzsche said, you see, before the age of technology, which is the age we live in, before the age of technology, we always had a goal. For instance, when Descartes said, will be master comme maître et possesseur de la nature, master and owner of nature, etc. And it was taken over by the French Revolutionary, and before that by obviously Voltaire and Rousseau, etc. We had a goal. The goal was happiness of everyone. Saint-Just, great revolutionary, said, le bonheur est une idée neuve en Europe. Happiness is a new idea in Europe. So these people wanted to act, to do something because they had a goal. But what Nietzsche says, and Heidegger takes it from Nietzsche, is now we are in the age of technology. We don't have an aim anymore. We have only technology which continues to do things. They do things because they can do things. So you have 3 guys, I hate them, because they can make a fake Rembrandt, they make a fake Rembrandt. So exactly what's the goal? Is it happiness? Are we happy because we have a fake Rembrandt? I'm not happy. I don't know if you are. So Nietzsche called this, by the way, the will to power. The will to power is the most intimate essence of being now in the technical age, and it's prevalent. It's everywhere. So this is my last idea. We do things because we can do them. And artificial Gen AI, people seems to be just running with it and doing things because we can do them. What's the goal? What's the goal? What's the objective? That's, sorry, kind of, I hate it because I didn't like watching this fake Rembrandt. Anyway, the conclusion. I have focused in this talk about Gen AI. I think that it poses 4 problems. I will just recapitulate the 4 problems I said. First of all, it's impossible to say anything sensible about ethics and aesthetics with Gen AI. So if Gen AI is everywhere, where is ethics? Where is aesthetics? That's point 1. Point 2, where does Gen AI speak from? Elle parle d'où? Say it in French. L'intelligence artificielle générative, elle parle d'où? And 3, this is the Lenin idea. How could Gen AI take sides? And 4th, Gen AI produces simulacra, which is dangerous. And it does participate in the loss of the aura of the work of art. I think I'm not making a lot of friends here, but anyway, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Laroui. Really, I admired your thought and how you have shared something very different from the usual sharing from our experts, because you tackled the subject from philosophical point of view, and I think that is very important. And we don't have just to tackle these kinds of AI technologies and advances in technologies just from a technological point of view, because I think that at the birth of any science, we need to start with philosophy. And I think that philosophers are great in asking the right questions, and scientists are great in answering these questions. And this is something very, very important. I really admire the number of philosophers and thinkers that you have mentioned. Immanuel Kant, Heidegger, Descartes, Nietzsche, also Da Vinci and Rembrandt in the other side of art. And also, I have just a question, Professor Laroui, because I'm also looking for understanding these kinds of technologies from the philosophical point of view. And when I search in different books, I just found Max Weber, who talked about science and technology from a philosophical point of view. But unfortunately, I didn't find, I don't know if you know, you can share with us, I didn't find someone from our culture, Moroccan culture, like Bruno Rocht, or more broadly from Arabic culture or Muslims culture. Are there any other philosophers and thinkers that have tackled the problem from this side?
Thank you, Mohammed. A great question, because you're talking about Max Weber. Now, it's interesting because I was talking about Descartes and then about Heidegger, and Heidegger and Nietzsche. But between Descartes and Heidegger, Max Weber played a significant role. By the way, I want to open a bracket because you were saying something about Arabic Muslim scientist. Max Weber is considered by the Germans as the founder of sociology. And I have written a book called Plaidoyer pour les Arabes, where I remind people that the real inventor of sociology was Ibn Khaldun, 500 years before Max Weber. So, but I close this bracket because it's not the question. However, you say something about Max Weber, and you say the only thing you found is, but it's interesting because it's exactly the trait d'union, the hyphen between Descartes and Heidegger. Why? Because Max Weber introduced the concept, he says it in German, die Entzauberung der Welt, which means the disenchantment of the world, le désenchantement du monde in French. What does he mean? He says that for thousands of years, the world was a magic place for the human being, because you could see trees and you think that trees had also a soul, and you see a river and you think the river, you respect the river, and you see birds and you think they're maybe messengers from paradise. Everything was enchanted, right? But then Max Weber said it started with Descartes when he said, you know what? The only thing which is absolutely real, certain, is the I, the subject. I think, therefore I am. the res cogitans, to say it in Latin. And from that moment, when Descartes introduced the subject in the Occidental philosophy, started this process of disenchantment of the world. Science started to answer all the questions. We know exactly what is rain. It's not Zeus urinating on us, as the Greek thought. We know why we have mountains, why we have beautiful birds, is evolution, etc. So science is like answering almost every question, and techniques takes over. So that's what Max Weber said, and it's the conclusion by Max Weber, which was obviously taken by Heidegger, is that in a world which is completely disenchanted, which only science explain things and techniques make things, then we've lost the objective. That's what I said during the talk. Because when the world was an enchanted place, when we thought that everything has a soul, that there are miracles, that are wonderful things, you could have some objective and think, well, I want to be in harmony with this enchanted world. The old Greeks were talking about the cosmos, the ordained world with an order, and then my place. That's Aristotle thinking. My place, what is my goal in life is to find my natural place where I should be in the cosmos, right? But with Max Weber says, okay, now the Entzauberung der Welt, the world is not enchanted anymore. The only thing we have left is science and technique and technology. Therefore, it's dangerous to have a world, and I think I am a scientist in a way, I'm an engineer, but I'm not oblivious of the danger. In a disenchanted world, if you let technology reign supreme, then you get exactly what I was denouncing, people making a Rembrandt. Why? You see? So thank you for reminding me of Max Weber, as between Descartes and Heidegger, you have Max Weber. That's true.
That's great. In fact, maybe you have also tackled the subject of, in fact, language that we call large language models and generative AI. And I'm not sure, for example, there was a great debate between Chomsky and Piaget about this. And also, I have read that Chomsky has criticized ChatGPT because he considered it as high-tech plagiarism. But there is another point of view. What do you think, Professor Laroui, of, for example, you have also mentioned that the big book, that means that we cannot write everything in the book because we can see other things, we can sense, and there is many important things that cannot be included just in a written language. So here maybe I would just say something regarding your philosopher Wittgenstein.
Wittgenstein, yes.
Yes, what would have said if he is with us now regarding Gen AI, according to your analysis?
That's a great question, because obviously Wittgenstein was a genius. So trying to answer in place of Wittgenstein is a daunting question. It's obviously very, very interesting and daunting. But I think that he would have used again this metaphor of the big book, which he used in 1929 in this lecture. He would have said, ChatGPT, as far as I understand, ChatGPT uses huge volume of data and try to predict by some statistical means, in fact, what word or expression would come after that expression, etc. And I think that Wittgenstein would say that's funny, because it's not even the big book. Because the big book, to start with, is you have someone who writes every fact that has happened. Now, what ChatGPT doesn't do that. ChatGPT would look at what everybody has written with some errors, with a lot of errors. And then it would produce a text with, I think you call them hallucinations, which is things that are not there, but they are there because the algorithm shows you there. So I think Wittgenstein would have said what Plato said about poets. You know that Plato, in his ideal city, what Al-Farabi would call the Al-Madina Al-Fadila, in his ideal city, in his book Republic, Plato said, "We don't want poets here." And he wanted to exile all poets from his ideal city. And the question is why? Why? Because he said, look, we have nature, we have reality. And what poets do, they don't talk about the reality. They superimpose something on reality. It's dangerous because basically it's lying. You are lying. So I think Wittgenstein would say about ChatGPT is what Plato said. We should exile it from the ideal city because it's not producing a recording of something that happens. It's producing a text based on what other people have reported. It's like, for instance, if I were a journalist and somebody told me, go to China right now, there's something happening there, and I don't want to fly to China, so I just remain here in Ben Gurion, and I start reading what all the other reporters are writing about what happens now in China, and I will just make a summary and send it to my publisher. It would be lying. It would have no moral value, but I could do that. There is even a book written about that, a book called Scoop, a very funny book in the 30s. But that's, I think, what Wittgenstein would say about ChatGPT. It's not even the big book. It's plagiarizing, that's what Noam Chomsky was saying. It's plagiarizing the big book. So it's wrong.
Yes, that's great. Maybe I will finish with my last question because our team of MoroccoAI remind me to close this session. So here, I really liked the fact that you emphasized that the machine just imitate knowledge, imitate thought, and I think that it is really similar to birds and airplanes. So we have imitate how to fly, but we haven't created a new bird. We have created a new science of aerodynamics. We have invented the airplane. So the question here is, what will be the future of innovation, Professor Laroui? What are the limits of what human should focus on, and what will be the role of the machine and AI in the innovation process?
Well, that's a great question. You know, we organize every year at the EM6P in Ben Gurion something called Science Week. We will have the fifth edition this year between 17 and 23 February. And funny enough, your question is very nice because the title, the theme I have given this edition of Science Week is Shaping the Future. So that's it. So I'd like to invite you and all the team of MoroccoAI and everyone who is interested to come to Ben Gurion between 17 and 23 February. And we will try from all kind of, the College of Computing, and then the Faculty of Medical Science, and then the engineers, and then the architects, and then College of Agriculture. Everyone is going to try to answer your question. Because it's interesting, but it could take hours and hours and hours. The only thing I can say for sure is this. Obviously, the future is what we are going to do with the future, but we should always remember that we are in a dangerous age, the age of technology, when technology is just running ahead. The will to power that Nietzsche was talking about, the will to power, and then it has become now the will to will. It's not even a will to power, because technology doesn't want to be president of some country or something like that, but it's just going away. So we need, that's my conclusion, other that you're welcome to Science Week. My conclusion is we need to stop for a while and think about the implication of what Heidegger calls the technology age. We need to stop for a while and think about it from a philosophical, ethical, aesthetical point of view.
That's really great. And we have a habit here in our conference. At the end of each session, we ask our speaker to say a final word of MoroccoAI in the community of MoroccoAI, mais en français.
En français. Écoute, merci en tout cas pour l'invitation. Mais ce que je voudrais dire, c'est que vous faites un travail fantastique. Pourquoi? Parce que j'ai découvert au cours des dernières semaines, d'abord j'ai découvert un rapport que le Maroc était classé premier pays émergent en Afrique devant l'Égypte et l'Afrique du Sud, ce qui est formidable. Mais j'ai aussi découvert que le Maroc est l'un des pays qui est le plus en pointe, en fait, dans l'intelligence artificielle, dans les usages, etc. Et c'est des jeunes gens comme vous hein, qui font cela et je trouve ça formidable parce que dans les années 70, la France avait comme slogan « Nous n'avons pas de pétrole, mais nous avons des idées ». Et je crois que le slogan du Maroc actuel, c'est « Nous n'avons pas de pétrole, mais nous avons des jeunes qui ont des idées ».
Merci beaucoup avec ce mot qui nous touche vraiment du fond du cœur et toute la communauté MoroccoAI. Et encore une fois, c'était vraiment un honneur de vous avoir, professeur Laroui, parce que ça nous manque un petit peu cette perspective et cet angle philosophique qui ouvre un petit peu nos idées vers d'autres branches et tout ça pour améliorer notre connaissance et notre savoir. Encore une fois, merci beaucoup d'avoir accepté notre invitation. Nous étions très heureux de vous avoir parmi nous et au plaisir de vous revoir, Inch'Allah, dans une seconde édition.
Avec plaisir. Merci pour tout. Merci.
Si vous pouvez juste cliquer sur Entrer dans les coulisses ou la Return to the Backstage.
Backstage, ou plutôt, je vais sortir et je vais re-rentrer. Non, c'est pas le cas.
OK. Sinon, il y a un bouton à droite.
Oui. Backstage. Je vois un bouton Backstage.
Oui, d'accord. Vous pouvez cliquer là-dessus.
OK. J'ai cliqué.
Merci.